Welcome back, Rock Raiders. This is Slugger, and today we are going beyond the scope of the retail sets to take a look at the mothership itself, the LMS Explorer. Let's see what the scanners picked up. The LMS Explorer serves as the command center for the Rock Raiders team. With its powerful teleporters and scanners, it is capable of surveying the planet for resources and overseeing extended missions into the underground. Though never explicitly stated in the lore, recently discovered internal design correspondences confirm that LMS stands for LEGO Mining Ship. This is likely a play on the term HMS, referring to Her or His Majesty's ship. The Explorer is even incorrectly given the HMS moniker in the High Adventure Deep Underground comic book. Intrigued by this ship, a decade ago, a fan began work on a monolithic project, creating a one-to-one replica of the vessel using LEGO parts in a digital setting. Arthurial's LMS Explorer model has been the go-to when it comes to realizing what the ship would look like if it were to be fully constructed using LEGO bricks. This digital model contains a staggering level of detail and accuracy to the source material. Arthurial was kind enough to chat with me about the design process of building this model, as well as his inspiration for tackling this project to begin with. I remember playing Dwarf Fortress at the end of 2010 and wanted to play a different PC game, so I decided to pick up LEGO Rock Raiders again. When I saw the spaceship in the intro, I thought that it looked really cool. I wondered if somebody had created a replica of the ship and found Rock Raiders United on the way, but I couldn't find a one-to-one replica. Bricklink's program Studio 2.0 is the staple software to use when designing LEGO digitally these days, but it's important to note this wasn't the case 10 years ago. First, I used LEGO Digital Designer. That program crashed at around 18,000 bricks though, even with lower graphics settings. I switched to LeoCAD, which became slower and more unstable as time went by, but at least I could complete the project. Sometimes I would encounter bugs like slightly displaced bricks, which were hard or impossible to fix. I also discovered that I used the wrong main colors. I guess this happened because the scenes in the game are really dark and make everything look darker than it actually is. Luckily, I could fix this easily in yet another program, MLCAD, since you can select all the bricks in a list and recolor them all at once. The sheer number of programs needed for this project almost seems like an inadvertent advertisement for Studio 2.0. Arthurial agrees. It's better in every way. Faster, better controls, and more stable. I wouldn't be surprised if I only needed a fraction of the time to complete the ship compared to my attempt with all those other programs back in the day. Unfortunately, the piece count and number of non-existent parts will prevent the one-to-one model from likely ever being fully constructed in real life. But the same cannot be said about other possible scale lengths. Arthurial has also designed other versions, including the 1:8, 1:16, and 1:32 models. I think I made those smaller models out of curiosity, and as a test to see how scaling down would work out, in case anyone ever wanted to attempt to build a smaller version. Speaking of which, let's talk about that point for a while. Some of the images you have been seeing are photographs I've taken of my 1:16 LMS Explorer model, designed by Arthurial, of course. This physical model is likely one of, if not the only one of its kind to exist in the real world. One of my goals with this video is to change that fact and encourage you to build one as well. Simply put, this design is incredible, and the final product is spectacular. The connections are all solid, and it doesn't suffer from any flimsiness which can sometimes manifest in digital builds. The completed model is hefty, and won't run the risk of breaking apart should it fall off a shelf or anything. I do want to make you aware of the challenges you might face when building it, however. Firstly, the 1:16 design uses approximately 1,200 pieces. With a part count like that, you will need to get organized and figure out what pieces you have versus what you will need to source from elsewhere. A small number of the pieces do not exist in real life, but they are easily substituted without much hassle. For example, I swapped the trans bright green pieces for trans neon green pieces of a similar style, save for the teleporter on the bottom. You will also need to combine some 1x3 and 2x3 slope pieces to account for the non-existent 3x3 light bluish gray slope bricks required in the design. For everything else, you'll want to make a shopping list, like this one, and keep track as you acquire bricks. This can be done easily by loading the model into Studio 2.0 and using the shopping cart button. Here's where we get to the prices involved. Most of the bricks in this model are easily sourced or are quite mundane. However, some of the dark turquoise pieces can really add up in large amounts, these two in particular. I opted to replace them with dark bluish gray counterparts rather than spend the extra money, but your mileage may vary. All told, I spent less than $50 Canadian on the 1,200 pieces, but I was lucky enough to source the bulk of the pieces for cheap locally. Your total might be closer to $200 Canadian on Bricklink alone. Time is also a consideration as well. There are no instructions for this model, only a studio file to go off of, so your build time is increased dramatically as a result. The project took me around 30 hours to complete, but I will add that I am a novice when it comes to using Studio 2.0, so your time may be shortened if you're more familiar with the software. The process involves an outside-in approach to building it, since you aren't able to see the core of the model initially. I found the most success in starting with the top layers, moving to the bottom layers, and then slowly discovering how to connect them in the middle. There are some large Technic beams running through the core that grant a ton of stability, but it can be awkward building around them. There were several times when I had to remove bricks temporarily in order to fit more bricks in first. Some closing comments on the model. It is imperative that you get the right type of dark bluish-gray jumper pieces, specifically the ones that can fit a full stud in the middle of the underside, as you're gonna need a lot of them. I've also made a few cosmetic modifications to the model, especially with the engines, but nothing major. If we use the 1-to-1 model as a point of size comparison, it can be estimated that the LMS Explorer would be approximately 300 meters long if it were a starship that existed in the real world, using a stud to meters ratio. Truth be told, this is smaller than I imagined it to be, but let's throw out a few size comparisons to get a better sense of its magnitude. The Tokyo Tower, much like the Eiffel Tower, is approximately as high as the Explorer is long, giving us a fair reference point. Buckingham Palace is approximately 100 meters wide, meaning that 3 side by side would also equal the Explorer's length. For anyone familiar with the height of the Seattle Space Needle, the Explorer does dwarf this landmark by about 80 meters. The final point of comparison is to that of the Titanic, which dimension-wise is the most similar to the LMS Explorer. I think more than anything though, this helped me appreciate just how large the Titanic was. The Titanic also had a crew of over 900, which is most likely not true of the Explorer. This is taking us into the world of pure speculation, but I think it would make sense that the majority of the interior space would be dedicated to housing vehicles and collecting resources. It is a LEGO mining ship after all, and perhaps not the only one of its kind. Maybe there is an LMS Endeavour that became trapped in the frozen rings of an ice planet. Anyways, hopefully some of this information has been helpful or has inspired you to construct this model as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the build in the comments below. A huge thank you to Arthurial for not only designing these amazing models, but for taking the time to communicate with me and make this video possible. I've been your host, RR Slugger, and I hope to see you next time for some high adventure deep underground.